I would say that the most important thing to start with is really research and information, and that's the foundation of everything that we do. So since 1993, our office has been producing reports on international child labor and forced labor issues. And we see these reports as really a fundamental basis of good policies, laws, programs, and so on, both for governments and for business. So what those reports are, we have an annual Findings on the Worst Forms of Child Labor report that covers over 140 countries and territories, and it goes into the individual situation of the worst forms of child labor in that country, as well as what is the government doing about it and what should the government be doing more of about it. And we give country-specific recommendations for each government on how they should be addressing their child labor problem. And then our other flagship reports are some lists that we produce. One is a list of goods produced by child labor or forced labor around the world. So that covers about 150 countries around the world. And again, it goes into the specifics of what goods are made by forced labor, what goods are made by child labor in those countries. And then a third list that we produce is a list of goods produced by forced or indentured child labor. That's sort of the worst of the worst, children in forced labor situations. And that list actually has public procurement consequences. The U.S. government is barred from procuring goods that are found on that list. So then we take these reports and we share them with governments, we share them with business, and we work with those partners to help them do more. So with governments, we'll tell them exactly where we think they're falling short and what they should be doing more of. In some cases, we'll actually use some grant funding that we have to help them do more of that. And with businesses, we'll point them to their risks and start working with them on how they can start addressing those. Well, we have a team of researchers that really scans the landscape on the countries that they're covering to really make sure that they're capturing any kind of new research that's coming out from governments, international organizations, NGOs. We also fund research, so we work with research institutions around the world and international organizations like the International Labor Organization that has a lot of expertise on this type of research. So if there's child or forced labor out there in the world and we suspect it's going on but we don't have a lot of information, we'll fund a study. We also have the privilege of working with our colleagues at the U.S. Department of State overseas in all of their embassies and consulates. So they're really on the ground in those countries and they gather information for us and feed it back to us. We just develop relationships with civil society groups, with worker rights organizations, NGOs, and keep that information dialogue going so that we can try to keep up with what's the latest. We don't use classified information in our reporting because we want all of our sources to be available to the public. We started hearing a while ago from groups that use our research that we are doing so much, we're producing great material and no one knows about it. And we really heard that and realized that there's so many more partners out there that could be using our information if we were better distributing it and disseminating it. So we have created a couple of apps to really help us get that broader distribution. The first app is called Sweat and Toil, and it aggregates all of the reports that I mentioned to you into one. Over 1,000 pages of research are in this app. So you can go into the app and choose a country and see all the goods that we have listed as being made by child labor or forced labor, as well as the information on what the government is doing about these issues and the ranking that we give the government as far as how good their efforts are. We also have an app called Comply Chain that is a specifically business-focused app. So it answers the question, what should a business be doing about child labor or forced labor? We do get that question. We have businesses coming to us saying, okay, you've pointed us in the direction of our problem, what should we do about it? So this app goes step by step through what kinds of due diligence they should be doing, what should they do when they actually encounter a problem of child or forced labor in their supply chain, how should they be doing stakeholder engagement, and a lot of other issues like that. We have realized what an important role business plays in combating labor exploitation worldwide. And the business community has recognized that as well. I think you've seen a huge shift in the last decade from sort of arm's length to embracing this idea that there is a business responsibility to protect human rights, and that we are all in this together and we can work together to solve the problem. So, that hurdle has been crossed, and now we're just trying to think about, with the mandates that we have, how can we make our information the most useful to business that it can be? And how can we engage directly with business to help them really understand the issues and understand specifically the next steps they should take? We've also used some of our grant funding. We've been privileged to receive some funding from Congress, and we've funded projects all around the world to get kids out of child labor or to address the needs of forced labor victims. So we've used some of that to fund public-private partnerships where companies and industry groups really have a role in working together with our grantee to combat the problems together. So we're doing that in the vanilla supply chain in Madagascar, cocoa in West Africa, hazelnuts in Turkey. We've done it in garments in Bangladesh and many other sectors. Well, I'd like to think that our reports have had a role. We've been publishing our reports since 2001 was the first time we put out our findings on the worst forms of child labor report. And even before that, throughout the 90s, we were publishing sort of precursors to the reports that we now publish on an annual basis. So throughout those couple of decades, I think there's really been a growth in global awareness about the issues, and I'd like to think that we played a small part in that. There's also been tremendous media coverage, especially in the past 5-6 years. Several media outlets have really made it a focus and have published some major exposés about things that have really gotten the attention of the global community, including business. I think legislation has also played a part. There's the California Transparency in Supply Chains Act, the UK Modern Slavery Act, the fact that several jurisdictions are now looking at replicating a Modern Slavery Act, whether it's Australia or Canada or other places. And then the U.S. also has some procurement regulations that affect sellers to the U.S. government. They're required to comply with certain rules regarding eradicating human trafficking in their supply chains. So I think companies kind of see the writing on the wall. They see more and more jurisdictions adopting these laws and know that it's becoming a little less voluntary and a little more mandatory.